Okay, when I say the word velociraptor, what's the first thing that pops into your head? I'm willing to bet it's an image that's been burned into our collective imagination, thanks in large part to Hollywood. It's a picture of a perfect movie monster.
Right? We picture this creature that's, at least 6 feet tall, covered in leathery, scaly skin, and just wicked smart. A predator that can hunt in coordinated packs, figure out how to open doors, and of course use that huge curved claw to just disembowel its prey. That's the velociraptor we all know and fear.
Well, here's the thing. The answer, which we've painstakingly pieced together from fossils that have been buried for about 75 million years, is a resounding no. Actually, not even close. The real animal was almost nothing like the superstar we see in the movies. So let's get into it. Let's peel back all those layers of Hollywood myth and uncover the true story of this absolutely incredible predator.
All right, so let's just rip the Band-Aid off and start with what is probably the most shocking difference of all, what it actually looked like. Because the reality, well, it's a lot more bird-like and frankly a whole lot smaller than you think. I mean, just look at this comparison. The difference is just staggering. On one side, you've got this human-sized, scaly monster from the movies, and on the other side, you have the scientific reality. An animal that stood just about 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet tall at the hip, and was covered from head to toe in feathers. Let's really put that 0.5 meter height into perspective, okay? We're talking about an animal roughly the size of a big turkey. Seriously. It probably weighed at most around 30 pounds or 15 kilograms. Think about that famous kitchen scene. Now picture it with a flock of angry, toothy turkeys. It's a very different movie, isn't it?
So you have to be asking, where did Hollywood get this massive size from? Well, it's basically a case of mistaken identity. The author of the Jurassic Park novel, Michael Crichton, was basing his raptors on a much bigger, much beefier cousin called Deinonychus. At the time, there was a theory floating around from paleontologist Gregory Paul, who suggested lumping Deinonychus into the same genus as Velociraptor. Now, this idea is pretty much rejected today. I mean, the two animals lived millions of years apart on totally different continents. But let's be honest, the name Velociraptor, it means swift thief. It just sounded way, way cooler. And so the name stuck.
And the feathers? How do we know about those? Well, this isn't just some wild guess. It's backed by some seriously solid fossil evidence. For one, we found incredibly well-preserved fossils of its close relatives, like Microraptor, that show a full coat of feathers. But the real smoking gun came in 2007. Paleontologists found these little bumps on a velociraptor's forearm bone, the ulna. They're called quill knobs, and they are the exact same anchor points that modern birds have for their big wing feathers. They also had a wishbone, or a furcula, just like a chicken. The evidence is just overwhelming at this point. Dr. Mark Norell, who was one of the paleontologists on that huge 2007 study, he put it perfectly. He said, if these things were alive today, we just think they were really, really weird-looking birds. So forget the green, scaly monster. The image you should have in your head is a strange, toothy, ground-running bird with a horrifying claw on its foot. That is a real velociraptor. Okay. So it was a feathered turkey, but it was a feathered turkey with that terrifying sickle claw, right? Oh, absolutely. That part is 100% real. But how it used that famous weapon? Well, that's another area where Hollywood's version took a major detour from reality. The movies love to show the raptors using that claw like a razor, right? Slashing through the soft belly of their prey. It's a really gruesome and, let's face it, memorable image. But from a biomechanical standpoint, it's just really unlikely. See, the claw was incredibly sharp at the point, but the curved inner edge wasn't really a blade. It was a pretty poor tool for slashing. Its actual function was something much more precise, and you could argue, even more terrifying. Most scientists today support what's called the raptor prey restraint model. The best way to picture this is to think about a modern hawk or an eagle. They used their talons to pin their prey to the ground. Velociraptors likely did the same thing. It would leap onto a smaller animal, use those claws not to slash, but to puncture vital organs and literally pin the victim to the ground. Then it would use its own body weight to hold it down while it started to eat. It wasn't a slasher, it was a pinner. It was a precision weapon for gripping and subduing its prey. Now, how can we be so confident about this behavior? I mean, it's just a theory, right? Well, it's because in 1971, a team of paleontologists in Mongolia found one of the single most incredible fossils ever unearthed. It's a piece of direct, behavioral evidence frozen in time. They found a velociraptor locked in a death match with a protoceratops. This amazing fossil is famously known as the fighting dinosaurs.
And when you look at it, you can see the Velociraptor's sickle claw isn't slashing. It's plunged deep into the throat region of the Protoceratops. At the very same moment, the Protoceratops is biting down with its powerful beak, crushing the raptor's arm. It's a perfect snapshot of that piercing, gripping action the restraint model predicts. The two of them were probably buried instantly by a collapsing sand dune right in the middle of their fight, preserving this brutal moment for us to find millions of years later. So, what we have now is a feathered, turkey-sized predator that pinned its prey. But what about its brain? You know, another huge piece of the movie myth is its super genius intelligence, and of course, its pack hunting behavior. The idea of raptors working together, setting traps, flanking their prey, it's probably the most iconic trope of them all. But here's the shocker. The evidence for this is actually really, really thin, and the evidence we do have doesn't even come from Velociraptor itself. Yeah, the main evidence for pack hunting comes from fossil sites where multiple Deinonychus, remember the big cousin, were found buried with one large herbivore. For years, the interpretation was, aha, proof of a pack hunt. But a newer and, frankly, more compelling theory paints a very different picture. It suggests this was more like a chaotic, frenzied mobbing of a carcass, kind of like what you see with Komodo dragons today. It wasn't a coordinated team effort. It was a free-for-all. The fact that many of the predator skeletons are young ones even suggests that there was a lot of dangerous infighting going on, not a clean, successful hunt. On top of that, we've got direct evidence that Velociraptors were not picky eaters. They were opportunists. We found their tooth marks on Protoceratops skeletons that show they were feeding on an animal that was already dead. And get this, in one incredible find, a Velociraptor fossil was discovered with a big pterosaur bone in its gut. Now, this bone was way too large for the raptor to have hunted and killed the flying reptile itself. The only logical conclusion? It was scavenging a free meal. So yes, it was an active hunter, but it was also an animal that would never ever turn down an easy carcass.
Okay, we've deconstructed the size, the skin, the claws function, and the pack behavior. So now, let's put all the pieces back together and paint a scientifically accurate portrait of the real Velociraptor. Our picture of this animal didn't just appear overnight. It's been built piece by tiny piece for about a century now, ever since that very first skull and claw were found in the Gobi Desert back in 1923. Every single discovery since, from the amazing fighting dinosaurs in '71 to the game-changing quill knobs in 2007, has added another crucial brushstroke, sharpening this picture more and more. So here it is. This is the real Velociraptor. A turkey-sized, fully feathered predator. It was most likely a solitary hunter and scavenger, roaming the sandy, arid deserts of what is now Mongolia and China. Those large rings in its eye sockets suggest it was probably nocturnal, doing its hunting under the cover of darkness. And its intelligence? Well, it was smart for a dinosaur, for sure, but its brain-to-body ratio was probably closer to a modern hawk, maybe a dog. It was clever, yes, but not some strategic, door-opening mastermind. This was an animal perfectly, beautifully adapted to its harsh desert home. Look, the story of Velociraptor isn't really about dunking on a movie. It's a fantastic example of the scientific process itself, right? It shows that our understanding of the past is never set in stone. It is constantly changing, being refined and improved with every single new fossil we pull out of the ground. The movie version will always be a pop culture icon, but the real animal, this strange, feathered, nocturnal desert predator, is to me infinitely more fascinating. And it really makes you wonder, what other incredible discoveries are still buried out there, just waiting to completely change what we think we know all over again?